How can I reply to coworkers who accuse me of automating people out of work? I work in a small manufacturing company on special projects that automate some processes, primarily design, drafting. This automation is mainly targeted at reducing errors, establishing standards, and cutting costs on certain orders so that we can reduce price and become more competitive. Now, a problem I often face is that when I explain what I'm doing to some coworkers, some of them get a bit abrasive and accuse me of trying to put people out of work. Now I think I get their perspective, but from my point of view, the more successfully automated we become, the more orders the company can bring in, and therefore it should offset whatever lost labor there might be. Not to mention, I'm well aware that due to the nature of my industry, no job could be entirely automatic. My intention is to enhance, not replace. I really don't know a good way to react when people have this point of view. Really, I'm quite proud of what I do and my work, so I get more than a little irritated. I'd say I feel like I'm being vilified. What would be an appropriate and professional way to respond?
I faced this same problem for many years. You have to constantly reinforce that you're increasing our capacity. Then if pressed, explain that the human component is the most valuable part, and that the company is currently wasting that value by assigning humans to repetitive tasks. Emphasize that if the company can increase capacity, then there will be more revenue and thus more budget for salary. And, of course, middle and upper management are going to have to reinforce that message. But the sad truth is also out there. There are staff who have no real skills, and they make a living by doing things that can be automated. You are a threat to them.
Subscribe to the channel to listen to more topical issues and how to handle them. Become smarter with us.
I'm sorry, there's no getting around the fact that you are putting people out of work. This is what automation does, and if you increase capacity, those extra profits go into the pockets of the business owners, not the workers, especially not the workers who have been laid off. When I started my career as a computer programmer, we were automating jobs like bookkeeper, accountant and order taker, shipping clerk. Now more cerebral jobs, like design, drafting, are being automated. But this is inevitable. Automation has reached the point where lower-level jobs are being eliminated faster than higher-level jobs are being created. Maybe the solution is a George Jetson-style economy where people work 3 days a week, 5 hours a day, just pushing buttons. Or everybody works for 10 or 15 years and then retires early. Or everybody gets a guaranteed basic income, and only those who want more need to work. I just don't know.
If you find yourself in a situation where you have to answer to being a part of automating jobs out of existence, the best thing you can do is to not try to sugarcoat or sidestep the issue. Just tell them honestly what you're doing and ask the workers to bring concerns to their management. This is really a failure of leadership in the organization and not your fault. Unfortunately, you probably need their cooperation to progress, and so it ends up being your problem. If you find yourself unable to get cooperation, it might be time for a sensitive conversation with the leadership in your org. The management should be providing some assurance to workers about the future of their jobs. The good news is that these kinds of transitions usually take significant time. There are opportunities to mitigate the harshness of the job losses by voluntary separation packages, attrition, retraining, or even just giving advance notice of job termination. Even if management does nothing, the workers are still getting a gentle notification that their jobs might be gone. Your project is not secret or hidden from the workers. They now know that the future is in question. That's going to be hard to accept at first, and you won't be able to say much to make them feel better.
Personally, I believe you should stick to the truth. People can sense half-truths very well. So a possible answer would be, yes. Short pause and then, do you know why I am doing this? So that this company is not pushed out of the market by some, here put a region where your international competitors are from, company and 5 years down the road, and so that everybody loses her job. Depending on your outlook, you can also add, if I do this well, we might even attract more international customers and more people might work in total for this company. Of course, it is tough on the people whose jobs are automated and cut. I wish this could be helped, but unfortunately it can't. No need to sugarcoat it.
Most of the tools I have developed over the years was to take away manual input and to use technology to store and use data in an easier way. Any of these tools put at least one person out of a job, and sometimes many. The fact is the business already recognized this and asked me to do something. Meaning that one of two things were going to happen. The business would continue to operate inefficiently, margins go down, workers will be asked to do more in less time, and either the business goes under by competitors that have better processes or it teeters on, and your prospects of a raise or promotion are almost none. Good employees at these businesses understand this and are in constant fear of losing their job, and bad employees can't see the writing on the wall and are shocked when their department is cut in one quarter. Management will simply hire someone else to do the automation. If they hire the wrong person to do this, the company will still have poor margins, issues, and possibly cut jobs or go under. If they hire the right person to do this, then this could save the company a ton of money, making them more profitable, and a good long-term employment opportunity. However, the jobs directly impacted by the automation will expire, and a company that does this well will hire more people for marketing, engineering, management and so forth, higher paying jobs and probably promotions to the people doing the automation. There is literally nothing good you can say to a person who is doing work manually and you are automating it, when that person doesn't have any aspirations of moving forward in their job or career. The groups I have automated usually went into two boats. The first is the stingy who won't help you automate their job. It takes me maybe an extra couple weeks of programming. Or the group is openly helping out and is saying what's the next thing I can do. I am not saying everyone kept jobs, but good employees that helped. I cannot remember one of them getting laid off. The automation exercise usually is spotlighted due to poor performing employees in an area. So often the exercise is to rid the company of these employees, not really due to the automation, but due to their performance.
I'm just doing my job, same as you are. In terms of a professional response, that's all that's needed. You don't have to justify anything or go into detail. It's unprofessional of them to complain about that, and you're the wrong person to complain to. When giving a professional response to an unprofessional aggressive question, it's best just to keep it short. Anything else invites discourse and potential argument.
The idea that automation destroys jobs with no benefit to anybody is a fallacy of economics that exists only because the people who believe it focus only on the jobs that are eliminated. In truth, automation reduces the cost of the good or service whose production or provenance is automated. The savings from the labor cost reduction can go to the pockets of the company owners, or they can be passed on to the customer. This extra cash creates more demand, either for consumer goods, if the extra cash is spent on consumption, or capital goods, if the extra cash is invested. In either case, this increased demand causes jobs to be created. It is certainly true that the displaced workers will need to be retrained in order to find work again, but it must be remembered that this is only a temporary state of affairs, and that before they were displaced, the increased cost of employing them was causing workers somewhere else to be denied jobs. The fallacy also rests on the false belief that there is only so much work to be done, but this is not true. There are still plenty of things that somebody wants done. A road here needs widening, I'd like a new deck behind my house, and there is lots and lots of scientific and medical research that needs doing. Freeing up labor in one place makes labor available for these other things.
Now a problem I often face is that when I explain what I'm doing to some coworkers, some of them get a bit abrasive and accuse me of trying to put people out of work. So stop telling them. If the subject comes up, explain to them that you're working on some automation without going into specific details.
As some others have stated, progress will inevitably result in lost jobs. However, I'm a firm believer that the conversation shouldn't be, how do we get those people working again? But rather, how do we get to the point where people are valued for more than their work, and therefore people don't have to work? If everything were automated, and I mean hyperbolically everything, then human labor itself could become obsolete and there would be no need to work for anyone. Basic human needs could be guaranteed simply by existing, and the only work people would have to do is voluntary. It is a fallacy of modern capitalism that all people have to work at all. In the end, your goal of automating work will improve life for all people, and it's difficult for many to broaden their horizons beyond their immediate problems to recognize this utopian goal.
In your opinions, what would be an appropriate way to respond? I suggest you try to avoid engaging in conversations of this sort with coworkers that take this the wrong way. You can try to explain to them just how you did here. Tell them that your job is to enhance, not to replace, and that you are actually making their lives easier so they can be more productive. Perhaps give them some examples of things you've implemented that are currently helping them perform their work. After that, if some coworker insists on accusing you or taking it the wrong way, then I suggest you stop the discussion and move on. I'm sure you have better, more important things to do.
Automation can result in savings that get passed down to the working class. You may be putting people out of work through automation, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. For a company that operates ethically, automation will allow manufacturing costs to go down and will allow the final price to go down in lockstep without the company suffering financially. The end result is that, although less people have work, things cost less, so less money is needed in the first place to live well. Unfortunately, the reality is that companies will often not behave this way. Imagine an item that costs $5,000 to manufacture and is sold for $7,000. Automation may reduce the cost of manufacturing to merely $500, but most companies whose sole purpose is to make a profit for shareholders will not reduce the price that consumers pay all the way down to $700. Instead, they'll keep it at or around its initial price. In such a case, less people have jobs, but things still cost the same, and the working class suffers. If your company behaves ethically and passes on savings to consumers, then you can explain that. If, on the other hand, your company only cares about the bottom line, then you have to face that. So in the end you have to ask, whose pockets are the savings going into? Explain the answer to your accusers.
You can also ask people for ideas about ways to improve the business. I've worked for many businesses, and usually the very people most at risk in this kind of situation, manual low-level workers, admin staff, sometimes middle managers, are exactly the ones who know what's inefficient or not working, when higher management don't. I've found their insights invaluable. So instead of a conversation about how people will lose their jobs, have conversations about how the business is taking steps to make sure it can still compete and win work over the next 5 years, so that it can secure all the jobs it can. People aren't stupid, and they understand how it can be, even if they would like it different. People above all hate to feel powerless and at someone else's whim. Be on their side. Ask if people have any ideas at all to be more competitive, or where they could be more efficient, instead, in case anyone's missed anything. You'll get their appreciation, more support than you would otherwise, even if grudging, their engagement, their understanding that you're trying to help, and very likely you will also get a fistful of ideas and insights that also benefit your company and your role.
What would be an appropriate and professional way to respond? Like so. Thank you for the flattery, but I don't have that much power. I'm just doing my job, like you. It's tough, but they run this place as a business, not a charity. People are hired to do work the business needs done. If you want them to keep making money when their work isn't required, feel free to give them some of your money. Or, better yet, how about you go talk to management about starting a training program so we can keep good people on board by giving them different tasks? If you start a petition, send it my way so I can sign it.
You are enabling people to make more. The main way to higher wages, both in a separate company and in the whole industry, is through higher productivity. The definition of productivity is the value of goods or services produced per employee, and making it possible to achieve the same results with less labor as the thing that makes each employee create more value. You can and should make a point that if an industry doesn't increase productivity, mostly through automation, then the wages in that industry will be stagnant and fall behind other jobs where productivity does grow year over year. You can and should make a point that if their company doesn't increase productivity, mostly through automation, then other companies, possibly in other countries, will still do so, reducing their costs so that the unproductive unautomated companies become useless and worthless, and they all will lose their jobs.
Done properly, automation makes producing your output cheaper. It requires fewer person-hours to produce each unit of output. This can result in reducing your workforce. But there are a number of ways that it can result in growing your workforce. When the cost of producing something drops, the change in production costs, assuming consumption stays the same, lets the seller do some combination of dropping prices or increase marginal profit. When prices drop, often demand increases. This is measured by elasticity of demand. When a 1% reduction in prices results in a X% increase in sales, the elasticity of demand is X. When X is much larger than 1, lowering prices can result in a massive increase in demand. This can result in producing more of your good after you automate, and even increasing the demand for people to produce your good. Even if you don't drop prices, increased marginal profit can also increase production. Things like marketing are mostly fixed costs that don't scale with marginal sales. Something with a higher marginal profit can afford much more marketing. And successful marketing increases demand for your product, without adjusting the price. This pattern, decreases in cost results in increase in spending, is actually really common. You can see it in car safety. Making cars safer to drive results in people driving more recklessly. So instead of reduced deaths, you get decreased travel times. Energy efficiency, more efficient lighting results in people installing more lights and leaving them on longer, so power use can increase. Computer chips getting cheaper and more effective has produced a much larger market for computer chips, and many other areas. If you are producing something that more people would love to have, but it costs too much, they don't know about it, then automating production is quite likely to increase the amount of production you are doing, and can increase total labor costs. This effect gets even stronger when you have any kind of competition. If they can cut costs faster than you, they could put your company completely out of business. In this case, you can cut costs by automation, have people be let go, and still as a result save jobs at your company. On the minus side, current corporate culture isn't only about growth and getting companies bigger in narrow areas. Incompetent head staff may be perfectly happy with cutting costs and increasing margins and not bothering with growth. Their goals are aligned with producing a great narrative about their performance, and "I cut costs 30% and boosted our margins" is a quicker way to get a bullet on your resume for your next job than "I cut prices by 30% and started a sustained increase in sales." Examine your C-level and other head staff. Determine what their priorities are. If their priorities is to cut costs and increase margins, then automation will probably, overall, cut jobs. If their priorities is to grow the company, then automation will, overall, produce growth. TLDR, what you should tell your coworkers depends on what the C-level staff is aiming to do. Automating work will enable your C-level staff to do what their aims are. Automating work may also convince your C-level staff to change direction, but only if they are interested in doing that.
If you are really interested in answering that charge in one-on-one interactions, perhaps you're willing to research if there's any truth to it? Why exactly is this particular automation project a priority for the company, over everything else you could be doing? If your employer is like mine, most likely its sales are limited by some combination of the amount of its production capacity and its labor cost per unit *. IOW. It could actually be taking on more work for those same workers, but they are already working at capacity for the staff they have, so suppliers are going to competitors for the rest. Additionally, it could perhaps be selling and producing more units, which would employ more workers outside this one group. If it could lower prices a bit, but this one group's work is so labor-intensive per unit that it's holding everyone back. Or one more possibility is that those workers are right. The company is staffed where it needs to be, sales, production growth isn't going to happen, and they are just looking for ways to do the exact same output with less staff. I think this one is probably unlikely. It'd be highly unusual for a business run like that to hire an IT staff, which is a huge red blinking cost sink, with the spare cycles to look for process improvements, but it's probably happened somewhere. In this case, expect to be laid off right after the staff in the newly automated department is laid off. Point being, figure out exactly what this group and the company is going to gain with this improvement, and talk about that, specifically and in detail. Most likely it is not a staff reduction. One thing that will also help with this clear suspicion is to make sure to ask them what about the current system annoys them, and make removing that a priority. That should make it look more like you are on their side, which you should be. Asterisk the old saw is, money, quality, and time, pick any two. The only way to cheat this equation is to make your workers more productive.
You can point out that you're also putting people to work. People who help design and manufacture the automation machines, people who create the parts, people who mine the metals for the parts, people who market and sell the machines. All of those are people who also need jobs. You are helping people do more with less, but there will always still need to be people to be involved in the process.
You are not putting people out of work any more than technical and scientific progress in general. In a modern society, nobody will pay you for being an alchemist or a swordman, and if you try to work as a slash and burn farmer, you will end up in jail. Even trying to be a coachman or a handcraftsman will be much more of a challenge than it used to be. Automation makes some jobs obsolete too. The thing to understand here is that this makes people unhappy, in the same way coachmen were unhappy about what Ford did. What you do is exactly like that, improving the life of most people, while putting out of work people who used to make a living from the gap that existed. Explain that to your friends. If they still insist that keeping the status quo is more important than progress, I don't think you will be able to convince them.
Now I think I get their perspective, but from my point of view, the more successfully automated we become, the more orders the company can bring in, and therefore it should offset whatever lost labor there might be. I've been in a similar situation, working to improve software and workflows that helped automate certain processes. Thing is though, the company is undoubtedly more efficient, and thus more profitable, now. But as far as those who got fired are concerned, that doesn't matter at all. What matters is that they lost their job and income. That's the way, I would suggest, that most employees see it. They're not seeing automation as something that will ease their workload, but rather as something that will eventually result in them getting laid off. And thus they'll be hostile towards those implementing such systems. So how to react? I would suggest referring any complaints to your manager. It's not really a debate you should get involved in. You're merely doing your job, and the final decision to automate, or not, is not yours.
I work in a small manufacturing company on special projects that automate some processes. It sounds like your bosses already expect to lay off workers as you are hired to automate the processes for them. So your bosses are the one who needs to explain, not you. Honestly, I don't think you should say anything at all. Just keep working to do the work you're hired to do. Unless you're the same type of worker and discovering all the things to automate work. In that case, you might need to explain, but if you're hired to automate processes, then it's clear your bosses are expecting to lay off workers or shuffle them around as they see fit.
You keeping the company afloat. If you don't automate these tasks, the company will lose out to the competition, who are automating these tasks, and none of you will have jobs. There are already a lot of good answers that deal with other benefits.
Like an executioner to a convict. This is not personal, this is purely professional. If not me, it would just be somebody else. Maybe this is not actually very good that is going on. And you do not need to prove it is good. But the opposition must happen at the different level than just abusing the final person who does.
Yes, you are doing their job, or part of their job, faster and cheaper than they do. Their reaction is perfectly normal. Someone who doesn't automate but simply does the same job the same way, except twice as fast as everyone else, is also putting someone out of a job. Now let's put this to the extreme. If they worked at half speed, they would create a lot of jobs. By working full speed, they put a lot of people out of their jobs. So why don't they work at half speed? Work ethics? Pride? Not wanting the entire factory to be closed? The very same reasons apply to you. Finally, if everyone works at full speed, the pie gets larger. Even a small piece of a big productive pie contains highways, social security, universal healthcare, free education, workers' rights, unemployment benefits, public transport, and a fair legal system. Small unproductive pies can't afford those.
What would you answer to this question? Please write under this video.